Hello everyone, this is Chelsea with NinjaTrader Platform Support. As I begin today, I want to start with picture and sound. If you're able to hear my voice, if you're able to see the slide in the room, just enter a Y into the room for me. I appreciate that. All right, welcome everyone. So my name's Chelsea Bell. Wanted to invite you to our NinjaScript Editor 401 event. I do need to read a quick disclaimer. It is important to understand there are substantial risks in trading commodity futures, contracts, or foreign currency. You should carefully consider whether such tradable is suitable for you, and this will depend on your specific circumstance and financial resources. It is possible to lose all of the funds deposited with your broker, and it is possible to incur losses beyond these amounts. Please inquire at brokerage support at ninjatrader.com for more information, or if you'd like to get a copy of the CFTC full risk disclosure. Also keep in mind, these training webinars are not a solicitation nor a recommendation, but simply educational in nature. All right, so today we're going to be working with unlocking a NinjaScript strategy that was created with the builder and going into some of the in-depth uh, items inside of scripts and taking a look a little bit at the syntax of C#. Before we begin, I just want to mention that NinjaTrader is free. You can use this for advanced charting, market analytics, automated strategy development, and trade simulation. We do charge for our product if and when you decide to trade live on the NinjaTrader platform. And if you'd like more information, there's a yellow box at the bottom of your display with a few links for you. Also, I invite you to join us on Twitter and Facebook for market commentary, for updates on contract expirations and rollover dates. Also, the NinjaTrader blog is your home for all things NinjaTrader. I'm entering some links into the room for you. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to our screen sharing. So at this point, you should be able to see my NinjaTrader Control Center. I'm going to go ahead and just jump in. We're going to begin by creating a strategy using the strategy builder. We're going to create a new strategy and unlock this, and then we're going to copy the code from the first script over to the unlock script. The point of doing this is so that if there are changes that you do need to make inside of your script that can't be accomplished with the wizard, it's nice to be able to generate code with the wizard and be able to put this into an unlock script where you can start adding additional code and doing further analysis. So to begin, I'm going to start by opening up the strategy builder. We're just going to go to new and then strategy builder. And I've brought this up on the screen. Excuse me. To start, I'm just going to give this a name. Right now I'm going to have it selected under new strategy, and I'll go ahead and click next. And I want to mention that I'm going to go through the strategy builder part very quickly. We do have another webinar on the strategy builder that we do on alternate Thursdays. So if you'd like, if I go too fast or if you have questions about something in the builder specifically, go ahead and interrupt me, throw in a question. The next time we stop for a poll, I'll go ahead and answer any questions that I see in the chat. And I do welcome your questions. So here in the strategy builder, this is going to be the original script. We're going to use the strategy builder to generate the code with, and we're going to make the very simple SMA crossover that we make in the strategy builder webinar. So for the name of the strategy, we're going to call this sample MA crossover. And if we want to put a description in, we can just put in simple moving average crossover. And it looks like, oh, I called it sample. Should have called it simple. So the message that I just got, let me go back for just 1 second. This message is just letting me know that this already exists and that I need to use a different name. The reason that this is important is because in NinjaTrader, which uses C#, each of the class names must be unique. So the name of the class is used as the name of the script. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and hit the View Code button. The View Code button will bring open the NinjaScript Editor and just show you the code that's been generated by the strategy builder. If we take a look right up here near the top of the script, we can see that the class name is simple MA crossover. We've used the name of the script as the class name. The class is going to be the container that holds your entire strategy. Over here to the left, you can see there's an organizational tool that allows me to click or a plus or a minus. If I click the minus on that to collapse that, you can see pretty much all of the code of the script is contained inside of this public class. This class for our strategy is in a larger container. The larger container is the namespace where all of our strategies go. So the NinjaTrader.NinjaScript.Strategies namespace, all of the strategies in NinjaTrader are inside of this namespace. So you can think of this as a very large box. And inside of this very large box, there are smaller boxes. And of these smaller boxes, these are all labeled strategies, and they'll have specific names on them. And you may pick up one of those strategies, and inside of that strategy, you're going to see that there's a few different methods. There's on-state change. This is going to trigger anytime the strategy itself is changing states from being opened up inside of the strategy window, and where it's going to run set defaults and configure, to where you're actually running the script, and then it's going to call data loaded, and then it's going to enter into a historical state, and then after historical real time, and then finally terminated. Below that is on bar update. On bar update is going to be triggered anytime a bar closes. If we have calculate set to on each tick or on price change, it's going to trigger anytime there's a tick or there's a price change. So basically on bar update is just anytime there's an update that's happening, it's going to trigger the logic of your code. And you see there's a little note we've added there. The logic of your strategy will basically go here. Let's jump back into the strategy builder here. On the next page, and again, I've called this simple MA crossover. Included with NinjaTrader is a sample MA crossover. We need to have a unique name, which is important. I'm going to go to the next page here. Just wanted to let you know any of these properties, if you were to copy a script over, you'd want to make sure you set these properties first. We're going to use all of the default settings for this, so we're not going to change anything here. I just wanted to make a quick mention of that. But I am going to go ahead and click the compile button. The compile button will get your script ready for use. There's a little message that appears that the strategy has generated successfully. So now that I have the basic part of the strategy started, it's just started right now, I'm going to go ahead and use this opportunity to make my copy. Now to make my copy script, I'm going to right-click inside of the View Code. When I've hit View Code, it's going to open up the NinjaScript Editor. Within the NinjaScript Editor, I'm going to right-click and select Save As. As I enter in this new file name, I once again must make sure that I use a unique name for my strategy. If I called it Simple MA Crossover, it's going to give me an error message. Let me know that I cannot use that name. So what I'm going to do is name this Simple MA Crossover, and I'll just call this Unlocked, because this is going to be the unlocked version of this script. Click OK on that. So it's made my copy and popped open the strategy builder. And the reason it's done this is because we've not unlocked the original yet. So the original is still locked for editing. Because of that, the copy is still locked for editing. So for our original, which I can close the View Code window for, our original is still here. If we go back a page, we can see the name of it, Simple MA Crossover. Whereas if we take a look at the name on the new one, this is the Simple MA Crossover Unlocked. We now have a copy of our strategy. So we've just copied our strategy. We can now click the Unlock Code button. So if I unlock this script, it is a permanent change. As I click the button, it actually gives me a little bit of a warning. After unlocking, you can manually edit the wizard-generated code, but you can no longer configure the strategy using the strategy wizard. If anyone else can comment on this, it sounds like one of our users is not able to hear anything. If anybody else is able to hear me, just go ahead and enter a Y into the room for me, and just let me know that my audio is working. Okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue. So once again, after unlocking, you can manually edit the wizard-generated code, but you will no longer be able to configure the strategy using the wizard. So this is a permanent change. It says, do we want to proceed? If we unlock this and we permanently unlock this, there's no way to open it back up in the strategy builder. So that's what we're doing today. We're making a copy of our strategy, and the copy, we're going to unlock the copy, and we're going to keep the original locked in the strategy builder. And the reason that we're doing this is simply so that we can keep using the strategy builder to generate the code, and then we can copy and paste that into our unlocks version, and we can just continue on being able to use the best of both worlds. I have a question in the room. It sounds like I've already answered your question. There's no way to relock that strategy. It's a permanent unlock. My advice, make a copy of it. So we're going to go ahead and click yes on this. All right, so this has been open with the NinjaScript Editor. If we open up a new strategy builder here, I'll bring that into view, and we look at the drop-down menu, we can see it's no longer in the list of strategies that can be edited with the strategy builder. So permanent change, it's permanently unlocked. We still have our original here in the list, but the copy is not there. There's no way to put that back. Before I continue, I just want to ask a few questions in the room. Very quickly, just let me know that you have a good idea of everything that we've discussed so far. Kind of let me know if I need to review anything. If we have two scripts that use the same name, how can these be distinguished? Number one, the version number will tell them apart. Number two, the date that the script was made will tell them apart. Number three, the names will be duplicated in the list and will not be distinguishable. Or four, the script names must be unique because these are used for the class name. Choose the radio button for the answer that you think is unique. Again, if you do have any questions at this time, I would answer them from the chat. But I don't see any questions coming in. I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll. The answer here is the blue 4. The script names must be unique as these are used for the class name. One more question for you. If a script is unlocked and will not open with the strategy builder, how can it be relocked? Number 1, it cannot be relocked. Number 2, click the relock button. Number 3, click undo until the script is back in the wizard mode. Or 4, remove all custom code and this will put the script back in the wizard mode. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll. The answer here is going to be the green one. It cannot be relocked. Great job. I'm going to go ahead and continue on. All right, so jumping back into this, like I said, I'm going to skip all of the stuff here in the strategy builder. We're not going to focus on that. We're really wanting to focus on the code itself. So I'm going to generate the code that we would see in the sample MA crossover script. So first of all, here on inputs and variables, the way that it works when the fast moving average crosses over the slow moving average, we get a long order. When the fast moving average crosses under the slow moving average, we get a short order. For that, we want the user to be able to adjust the length, so we're going to put in two variables to control the period for the SMAs. So we'll have a fast period. We'll have this default to 7. Call this number of bars for fast moving average. And to make this a little quicker for myself, I'm going to highlight and copy this. We're going to add in another variable. We'll call this one the slow period. Let's do double the length, 14. For the description, I'm going to paste that in. Just call fast slow. I'm going to have two more inputs for the user to control. And this is going to be for the profit target and the stop loss. So I'm going to have a profit target variable. We'll have this default to 20. This is the number of ticks from the entry that the stop will be placed. Profit target will be placed. And stop loss. Hang on 1 second. Let's make this a little quicker. I'll just copy and paste that. Stop loss variable. Have this default to 10. And this will be number of stops ticks from the stop that the, excuse me, entry that the stop is placed. Okay, so we've got our variables set up here. Let's go ahead and hit the next button. Takes us to the conditions and actions. I'm going to go ahead and click add. On the left, we're going to select the slow moving average. So I've selected SMA for the, I'm going to check the box for plot on chart so we can actually see this appear on the chart. For the period, instead of using the hard-coded 14, I'm going to go to user input and select fast period. For the color, I want to be able to tell these apart, so I'm going to choose a reddish color. We'll go with crimson. Over on the right, we're going to choose indicator again, and this time we're going to select SMA. For the period, we're going to set this to our slow period. We're again going to enable plot on chart. And then here for the color, just because it's slow, I'm going to use something bluish. Last, in the center, instead of equals, we're going to change our operator to cross above. And our look back period, we're going to leave this at 1. We're looking for the cross to have happened within 1 bar. So here's our cross above command, condition. When the cross above occurs, we want to enter into a long position. So I'm going to click add. Under order management, enter long position. This will be a buy market order. Click OK on that. So that's the first part of our condition. I'm now going to add in a second set here, set 2. I'm going to actually just highlight this condition from set 1, right click and copy. Set 2, I'm going to right click and paste. And hit the edit button and change cross above to cross below. So we just made a copy of it. We just switched it to cross below instead of cross above. Still using the same inputs and everything like that. One thing I like to come in here and change though, let's hit view code real quick and look at the editor. Never mind. Something that it was apparently fixed behind the scenes. So I'll just go ahead and continue on. So for this, we're going to put in a sell order when the fast SMA crosses below the slow SMA. We're going to go short. So under order management, we're going to enter short position. Hit the next button. This takes us to stops and targets. Hit the add to add in a profit target. I'm not using a signal name, but I am going to change this to ticks. And for the value, we're going to go to user input and do our profit target variable. Click OK on that, and we're now adding in a stop loss. Again, setting it to ticks, setting the value to the user input, and selecting the stop loss variable. All right, so this is the meat and potatoes of our script here. It's a very simple script. It's basically just for a demonstration. I'm going to hit the compile button to get this ready for use. And I'm going to hit the view code button. So now we can actually view the code that has been generated in our script. We have our SMAs, our SMA1, SMA2. These are added in with the fast period and the slow period. Then we change the brush on those to our red and teal colors. And then it gets added to the chart. So it adds it to the chart there. This current bar check, this is making sure that there's at least 1 bar. So as it starts to plot, or as you call any data or anything like that, it doesn't cause any errors. Make sure that there's at least 1 bar. If you were to call 5 bars ago, you would want to make sure that your script doesn't start until the 5th bar. If you were to start it on the 1st bar and you call 5 bars ago, there won't be a bar 5 bars ago because you're on the very 1st bar. And that would cause an error. That would cause your script to completely become disabled. So a check for current bars, like the one that's here, this is going to prevent your script from causing an error if you are calling back or if you're setting plots or things like that. Now this is going to need to match whatever you're calling. If you call 5 bars ago, you would want to make sure that current bars is greater than 5. If you call 10 bars ago, you want to make sure current bars is greater than 10, so on and so forth. Don't call back any more than there are bars on the chart. And that'll help prevent a large amount of errors. Scrolling up, I did mention earlier that our class name is the name of the strategy. The way that we know that this is a class is, well, it uses the word class here, and everything inside of it is going to be tucked inside an open curly brace and a closing curly brace. And this is the way that we define things as being inside of each other, and we call that scope. So our class is within the scope of the strategy's namespace. The onState change method is within the scope of the strategy. These two private variables are also within the scope of the strategy. OnBarUpdate, this is also being declared within the scope of the strategy. However, this if statement right here, this is within the scope of onState change. So if I click the little minus sign here, it kind of allows us to see a little bit easier how things work. So we have our namespace. Inside of the namespace, we have our strategy. Inside of our strategy, we have a few variables being declared. We also have public variables being declared. The public variable here is where the user is allowed to set these. These private variables are used for just inside of the script. So we have our onState change, OnBarUpdate, all of these variables. These are all within the scope of the strategy. Inside of onState change, we have an if switch. This if statement, these set of conditions, these are going to trigger different behavior as the script changes states. Down here in OnBarUpdate, this is going to be triggering anytime a bar updates based on the bar closing or tick being received or the price being changed, depending on what the calculate setting is set to. So anytime there's an open curly brace, there must be a closing curly brace. If you put your cursor right in front of the opening curly brace, it'll automatically highlight the opposing closing curly brace. If you scroll and it hasn't highlighted something, that's a tip-off that there's one missing. You have to have the same number of opens as closes. So here in our if statement here, we have an open and we have a close. You'll notice up here where we have no curly braces at all, whatever the very next line is when there's no curly braces used, it just uses this as a one-line action block. And that's what I would call it. So the if statement here, this is a branching command, and below the branching command is an action block. So this action block, if the if statement evaluates as true, anything inside of this action block between these two curly braces is going to be triggered. If the if statement is not true, then this entire section gets skipped and it just moves on to the next if statement. Now I've called onState change and OnBarUpdate methods. So a method is like a function. Just like in math, you call a function and it's going to do a preset of instructions every single time. So if you call OnBarUpdate over and over and over, it just triggers the code inside of OnBarUpdate to trigger over and over and over, basically anytime a bar is closing. We know that this is a method because of the two parentheses that are here. These two parentheses are needed anytime you declare a method. They're also needed anytime you call a method. As an example, behind the scenes, NinjaTrader has a method called crossAbove, and it's been declared public void crossAbove. And it uses these two parentheses, and it actually allows us to supply a few different arguments to it. So we call these parameters. The way crossAbove works is, let me put my cursor here just inside the opening parenthesis, and this is a little trick for you to use to see what a method will accept. Hold Control, hold Shift, and then tap the spacebar. So on your keyboard, hold Control, hold Shift, tap the spacebar. This brings open the IntelliView. The IntelliView is very useful because it's telling you exactly how you can use any of these particular methods. Cross above allows you to put in a data series, a double series, a second double series, and a look back period that's an integer. Integer is any whole number. Over here on the left, you can see we've got 1 of 3. Well, the 2 of 3 is going to be allowing for a double, a series, and an integer for the look back period. And if we go to 3 of 3, then it switches and you've got series crossing a double, and again with the look back period. So there's 3 different ways that you can actually use cross above, and you can supply it 3 different types of arguments. Each one of those is called an overload. So these are overloads that we're looking at here. There are 3 overloads for cross above, 3 different ways to use this. Below that is enter short. The enter short, hold Control, Shift, tap space. You can see a few different ways to call enter short. We can call it with a quantity and a name. We can call it with a bars in progress index if we have multiple data series, and then a quantity and a name. Or we can just give it a name and not a quantity. You'll just use the default quantity, which is 1 by default, unless the user's changed it to some other default quantity. 4, we can just give it a quantity, no name. Or 5, we can just call enter short. It'll just place a market order and it's not going to give it a name, and it'll just use the default quantity. So here on our if statement, you'll notice that there's no semicolon at the end of the branching command. However, there is a semicolon after return, and there is a semicolon after the call to enter long. There's also a semicolon after we declare our variables, or anytime that we were to assign a variable. So if I were to call, let me go over to my unlock script here. Let's say that I were to have a integer that I just called my integer equals 1. This is an assignment. This assignment, I'm assigning my integer a value of 1, and I terminate that with a semicolon. Any action is going to be terminated with a semicolon. Any branching command or anything else is not going to have one. So anytime you're calling an action, like calling interlong, or if you were to try and trigger onBar update, you would terminate that with a semicolon. You should never try and trigger onBar update. I was just throwing that out there as an idea. If you had your own method, you just called my method, and it said, public void my method, and you had those parentheses, you could call my method from in here, and you would terminate that with a semicolon. But where you've declared it, here and here, there's no semicolon. So it's just where an action is. That's where there's going to be a semicolon. Okay, that said, moving down here to the properties section. Down here, any of these properties, these are going to be public for the user to be able to change. Anything that you declare up here, which where you declare these isn't important, it's how they're declared. These are declared as public, these are declared as private. What that means is that the user is not going to be able to change anything for this SMA. We've created a property called fast period. They can change the fast period, but they're not able to really configure the SMA from the strategy. It'll be added to the chart. They can go into the chart and they can change some of the settings from the chart, but it's not going to show up in the strategy controls because this is a private object. Going back down, I haven't talked about brackets yet. So these brackets here are used for indexes. These are used for arrays, collections, lists, things where there's multiple elements inside of one object. As an example, a data series is going to hold a value for every single bar on the chart. That is a collection. If you wanted to be able to access a specific index in that collection, you would give it the number for the one you want. As we use bars ago, and this is what we would use for calling something from a data series, let's say that I wanted to switch back over to our unlocked version here. Let's say that I wanted to print the current close price. The way that I would do that is I would type the word close, give it an open bracket. Right there you can see the IntelliView has opened up. And it is suggesting to me that, first of all, close is a series of doubles, and that it is asking for a bars ago number, and that is a whole number, an integer. So if I put a 0, 0 bars ago would be the current bar. 1 would be 1 bar ago. So if I were to put bracket 0 bracket, this would print out the current close price, terminate that with a semicolon. If I were to put in a 1 here, this would print out the close of the previous bar. Okay, so that's brackets. Again, if you had your own list or... Okay, so that's brackets. Again, if you had your own list or array, you would also use those brackets to be able to call an index out of it. It's going to be reversed. Instead of it being a bars ago value, you're just going to ask for the actual index where it's going to start at, where 0 would be the first index. NinjaTrader flips it around simply because it makes more sense when you're doing stuff with bars and pricing. So that's for that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about are operators. Right here you can see one of those operators in use. This is checking to see if the state is in state.configure. That's an equals equals. That's doing a comparison, saying if one thing is equal to another thing, we use 2 equal signs. If we wanted to do an assignment, we use 1 equal signs. So we use if 1 equals, actually I'll just say if, I'll make a little integer for myself. My int equals 1, and we can say if if my int equals 1, then trigger some kind of action. So right here with this assignment, we use 1 equals, and here with our comparison, we use 2 equals. We can also do things like increment a value. So if I wanted to assign the value of my int and then add to it at the same time, what this would do is give me a value of 4. My int already has a value of 1, and I am adding 3 to that. The equivalent of this would be if I were to say my int equals my int plus 3. These two lines are exactly the same. They would do the exact same thing. A plus equals here would be the same as saying myself plus 3. But you can also do minus equals. You can also do divided by equals. You can also do multiply equals, so on and so forth. So those are operators. Plus is a operator, minus. In the comparisons, you can do operators such as comparison operators like less than equals or is not equal to, an exclamation mark equals is not equal to, greater than equal to. That's basically it for comparisons. All right, so now that I've gone over some of the basic syntax, we're going to use that information to copy over the code that we've generated so far from our initial script over to our copy script. So over on the left, I'm going to start at the top, and what we're going to be just paying attention to is where things are located. So we can see that the structure is very similar. We'll open up OnState Change 2 so we can see everything. So the structure is similar. We want to make sure everything goes in the same place. I'm going to copy the SMA declarations. Right-click and copy that. We'll go over to our unlock script, and I'm going to right-click and paste. Then I'm going to give it a new line here. As far as any of these settings, we would want to copy these as well, but we don't want to copy the name or the description. And to be honest, we only really need to copy the ones on the bottom. Those are the only ones we know are different. But if you wanted to copy all the other settings, that's fine. I just want to be specific that the names need to be unique so you can tell them apart from each other. This isn't like the class name. It's not going to cause an error or anything like that. It's just it's going to be very confusing for the user if you have your labels on these set the same. But like I said, we only really need to have the bottom part of that. All of the other settings we already copied from the original script when we made our copy. But below that, we do need to copy over the configure and the data loaded. I'm just going to copy the entire if, else if, and else if for the configure and data loaded. It's just a little quicker that way. Right click and copy. And I'm going to delete the existing configure, right click and paste, and just replace it. Going down, on bar update. I'm just going to grab everything in on bar update, right click and copy, and right click and paste. And the last section here is the properties section. Right click and copy. And right under unbar update is where I'm going to put that. I'm going to put another space there. Now this last section where it says wizard settings neither change nor remove, leave that alone. We're not going to copy that. We're not going to modify it. We're not going to change it. We're not even going to look at it. All of this stuff down here is what NinjaTrader uses to remember what changes you've made inside of the wizard, and also does things to make your script usable to strategies and other things like that. Over on the right, if we've done everything correctly, we should be able to right-click and compile the script without any errors being generated. And I heard a chime on my end, and that lets me know that everything did configure correctly. So we now have a copy of our script. It's got a different name. And at this point, our original is still locked. We can still use the strategy builder to modify it. But our copy script, which is now an exact duplicate, we can add any modified code to that we'd like to add that to. Now, as I was moving things over, I was making sure to put everything in the same place because where you put stuff is important. These commands like interlong, if I were to try and put something like this outside of a method, it's not going to know when that kind of code is supposed to be triggered. Basically, you need a method to be triggered for anything to happen at all. If I were to try and paste this interlong call outside of onBar update, so it's after the closing curly brace for onBar update, you can see I immediately get an error message. It doesn't know what to do with this. It gets, there's all kinds of error messages that are coming out. So if I were to move this call, let's say that I were to put it inside of the on state change, and I put it right here in data loaded. You can see that since it's inside of a method, it doesn't give me any compile errors. But here's what would happen. Anytime that it tried to enter the data loaded state, it would try and submit that order. That is not the right time for that. Basically, you only want this action to happen inside of onBar update. So this particular call here to enter long doesn't make any sense to put here. I just want to point out that it does allow you to compile it even though it doesn't make any logical sense. The fact that it's inside of a method is what allows that to compile. So anytime you're calling something that has a semicolon, that absolutely needs to be inside of a method. All right, let me look through my notes real quick, see if there's anything that I've overlooked. Everything's looking good. All right, I'm going to ask just a few questions and make sure everything's making sense. And for this, I'm going to take you over to the slides again and switch over to one of the slides I have in the room. You might need to full screen that. But basically, here's the question. And actually, let me close this for everyone real quick. Take a look at the screenshot. On line 92, I've got a red arrow where I'm pointing to a print. And I have a question about this specific line on line 92 inside of my screenshot. You may need to full screen the thing. There's on your toolbar, there's a full screen option if you need to make that a little bit bigger. But again, let me ask the question again. This code on line 92, when will this print of the time be triggered? And will this code compile? Number one, it will compile and it will trigger after onBar update. Number two, it will compile but it will not trigger. Number three, it will not trigger but it will not compile. So that, excuse me, I said that weird. It will not trigger, it will not compile. Or four, it will trigger but it will not compile. So the placement of this is where is where I'm trying to direct your attention. This line 92 is going to be outside of onBar update. So does this run after onBar update runs? Does this not run at all? Does it compile or does it not compile? I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll. So the answer here is going to be the orange 3. The placement of this, and a big tip-off is the fact that it is followed by a semicolon. The placement for this is incorrect. It's not inside of a method. This needs to be inside of a method, otherwise it is going to cause an error message. So the next question becomes, take another look at the slide again. On what line can we move the print so that this will run once per bar? Number one, we can add a new line after line 89 and move the print to line 90. Line 89 is going to be the closing curly brace for the last if statement for that cross below inside of onBar update. We would be adding a new line in between the closing curly brace for the if statement and the closing curly brace for onBar update, and it would be within onBar update. Number two, replace line 90 with this line. We would be deleting the closing curly brace for onBar update and replacing it with our print. Number three, add a new line after line 71 and move the print to line 72. Line 71 is going to be the closing curly brace for, excuse me, this is actually going to be the set stop loss line, but it's inside of on-state change. So it would be adding a new line inside of on-state change and adding our line to that new line. Or four, going to line 76, this is going to be the opening curly brace for onBar update. We're going to add in a new line and add our print to line 77. So it's going to be inside of onBar update. All right, so there's two correct answers for this. The green 1 and the blue 4. So adding a new line after line 89 would absolutely be okay because that is still going to be inside of onBar update. Line 89 is the closing curly brace for that cross below statement. It would still be inside of onBar update. That would be fine to use. Line 76, this is going to be the opening curly brace for onBar update. By adding a new line there, and this would just make our print the very first line inside of onBar update. It'd be the first thing that happens whenever the onBar update is triggered. All right. So let's talk about the error that would have appeared there. I'm going to go back to our screen sharing section. I'm going to put that print of time in there. And the reason that I used a screenshot is because when I type this in, immediately you can see these errors start appearing. So these errors mean that I can't compile the script. If I can't compile the script, it doesn't save my changes in it, and it's not going to be able to trigger that. What I want to point out here is the colors at the bottom, and I kind of want to show you something inside of the NinjaScript Editor that makes it really easy to find errors. So I want to compile. I try to compile. I can't compile. It gives me an error message. No compile allowed. If I go back to my original script here, the simple MA crossover, this script we generated with the builder, we know for a fact there are no errors in this file. However, if we right-click and compile, we cannot compile. The reason why all scripts in NinjaTrader are compiled at the same time. If one script has an error, none of the scripts are going to compile. So here's what we've done to make it a little bit easier. Let's say that we had this absolutely closed and we had no idea where our error is. As we start trying to compile, we don't think that our script has an error, but it's telling us there's an error. look down in the NinjaScript file column and read the name that you see in the NinjaScript file column and compare that to the tab with your file name. Are these the same? If they're not, that's a huge tip-off. The error is in a different file. The name of this file is simple MA crossover. The name of the file with the error is simple MA crossover unlocked. A very quick way to be able to find that error is to just double click on it. I'll double click. It actually opens up a new tab, and in that new tab, it's loaded the script that has the error, and it has put the cursor right at where that error is. So it has taken me right to the correct file, and it's taken me right to the error. All I had to do was just double click on the error. It takes me right to it. The other way that you can tell, I'm going to move this into a new window. Move this window into view here. Just take a look at the coloring on these. The very dull color, it's kind of like a darker, duller orange. This is going to let us know that this is the file that has the error in it. Over here on the left though, this is a bright, very bright orange, very, very bold, very bright. It's not as dark. It's a much lighter, much brighter orange. This is letting us know that the error is in a different file. So dull orange, correct file. Bright orange, incorrect file. So just keep that in mind. It'll help you get to your errors just a little bit quicker. Again, the fastest way to find it is just double click on the error message. It should take you right to it. So before I go into the next section, let's ask a quick question. How do I know if an error is in this file or another file? Number one, if the error message appears in the same editor, it's in this file. Number two, if the error message is dark, dull, orange, the error is in another file. Number three, if the NinjaScript file column will show the file with the error. Number four, if the color is dark orange, dark dull orange, the error is in this file. If the color is bright solid orange, then it is in another file. This is multiple choice. There may be multiple correct answers, multiple incorrect answers. Choose at least one that you feel is a correct answer. I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll. And the answer here is going to be the orange 3 and the blue 4. So the NinjaScript file column, that's the best way to look. It's just going to tell you what the name of the file is that has the error, and that's the best way to go find it. Or 4, you can look at the colors. If it's dull, you know you're in the right file and it's in there somewhere. If it's bright orange, it's not in there. You're looking in the wrong place. All right. The next section that I want to talk about is using prints. And this is my favorite part of the webinar because this is the most important thing that I think I can pass off as information. To start, we're done with the original script. We use this to generate some code. We're no longer interested in it. If I right-click and compile, I've already corrected the errors. All the error messages are now gone. We'll close that up. Strategy builder, we can close that too. We're not using that anymore. We've got our copy here. And we've got this basically where we're starting to add our own custom code to it. Let's throw it on a chart real quick though. So I'm going to right-click and select chart. We'll do an ES chart. And bring that into view. Right-click in strategies. Simple MA crossover unlock. This is our copy where we're going to be modifying things. Here's our user-defined inputs. We're going to check the box for enabled for this. It's asking me if it's just letting me know it's going to place orders without confirmation. I'll click OK on that. And here we have the backtest, the historical orders. These are all theoretical. It didn't actually place these orders. They appear immediately because this is the equivalent of doing a backtest, which is good because it's going to get your script ready. All of these SMAs have been calculating using historical data. It's been calculating historical positions. It should know about where you are, and it should be ready to take a good decision. Calculating historical positions, it should know about where you are, and it should be ready to take a good decision as new data starts being received. On our chart, we can zoom in here and we can see that where there's a cross, there's an order on the next bar. Here's a cross, here's an order on the next bar. Scrolling back, here it gets real close, but it doesn't actually cross, so there's no order there. But right here, it actually crosses and crosses back. I think it just counts that as one cross there. Another one happens here. Let's focus right here. Right at this spot here, maybe we think that a cross should have happened. Maybe we can't actually see, but in our mind, right here, a cross should have happened. How would you be able to tell why it's behaving the way that it's behaving? And the way we do that is we use prints. Another example, let's remove the indicators from the chart altogether. All right, so we're gonna compile that real quick. And I'm gonna remove, excuse me, I'm just gonna reload the script. And keep your eye on these orders. The orders are gonna stay in the same place. The orders are still there, but now all of the SMAs are gone. The script is still behaving exactly the same. It hasn't changed its behavior, but now we have no idea why it's placing orders there. So in a way, this is going to happen. This is going to be times where not everything is printed on your chart that you're using in your conditions that are triggering orders. Maybe there's a value that you've been storing and you want to know why it placed an order here. Well, what we need to do is we need to add prints to our script, and it's going to tell us exactly why it's behaving and why. First of all, let's just find out when the cross above is being triggered. One way to do that is to add a print with the time. If I print time 0, just printing the current bar's time, and I compile, all of these prints are going to go to the output window. I'll right-click and reload. So anytime that condition is true, we get a print. That's a quick way of at least knowing whether or not your condition is true or false. And you can set up this kind of print in the strategy builder too. But we want to know something more complicated than that. We want to know why there was not an order. We're picking a specific bar. I think we had picked the 1340 bar. Maybe we didn't go back that far. I think we did. But that's the bar that I'm going to choose. I'm going to choose the 1340 bar because I think that there should be an order here, and I don't see that there's an order here. So if I want to know why there was no order at 1:40 p.m., I'm going to print out everything being used in this cross above. Now, to do this, it's going to be a very big print. We need to print out the value of the SMA1 on the previous bar, the value of SMA2 on the previous bar, and then print out the value of the SMA1 on the current bar, as well as the value of the SMA2 on the current bar, and just look to see if it's crossed. If it was less than before and it's greater than now, then it's crossed, and we know that there should be an order there. It can also tell us why there's not an order. So let's add that in. As I print, I like to use something called string.format. It's a way of making your string nice and easy to look at. So I'll first type the word string. In the list here, there's a method called format. Open parenthesis. The IntelliView is telling us that we can give it a string, which is the format string, and then we can give it an array of objects of parameters, or we can just start adding parameters to this. So you can do the string format and then object 1 and object 2, so on and so forth. And that's what we're going to be doing here. So first of all, 2 quotation marks, that's a string. Anything in here is going to be taken as literally as is. There's no code that's going to be able to go in here. If I type close, it's not going to recognize that as the close. It's simply just going to recognize that as a bunch of characters. So what we want is a label. We're going to start by putting in the time. And the way that string.format works is, as it reads your format string, it's going to be looking for special characters, and those are going to be placeholders. Anytime it sees a placeholder, it's going to replace that placeholder with the object that's been supplied in the parameters. as an example, we're putting in a curly brace, 0, curly brace. This is our very first placeholder. Add a comma here, and then time, and then 0, bracket 0, bracket. And we now basically have a working format string. I'm going to just go ahead and run this real quick. So right here we have print time. I'm going to erase that. We now have a more complicated. We're using string.format and we're printing the time. But of course it's going to still do the same thing. Let's just take a look at the output of what it does. Reload. So it's printing on every single bar, but you can see it's now printing. Let's add more information to this print. I'm putting in a little separator there because, like I said, you can type anything into there. If it's a placeholder, it'll be matched. If not, it's just going to be random characters. I want to know what the SMA1 is doing on the previous bar, so I'm making a label, right? If I save this, we'll compile this, and we'll clear the output window, and then reload, right? This is just a label here. I'm just saying that this is the SMA1. Now I'm actually going to add a placeholder. So curly brace 1, curly brace, this is the actual placeholder for that. And then I'll put SMA1 bracket 1 bracket. This will be the actual object. It's replacing this 1 with this object. So if we right click and compile, clear the output window and reload, right? So this is our label, and it's done a replacement here with the actual value. All right, so now that we get the idea of what the format string does, let's add all of it in really quickly. So we want to know that it is less than SMA 2 on the previous bar and is now greater than on the current bar, so bracket 0 bracket, and we'll use our third placeholder. These start with 0, so the bracket, curly brace 2, curly brace is going to be our third placeholder. Now it needs to be greater than SMA 2 on the current bar. And we'll put in our replacement strings on this. SMA 2 of the previous bar, SMA 1 of the current bar, SMA 2 of the current bar. Let's break this onto two different lines. Since I didn't put a since I didn't put a semicolon on the end of this line, this is fine. I can break it onto as many lines as I want to. When I'm done, it'll terminate with a semicolon, so I can break these onto two lines. Let's take a look at what this has done now. Clear this out and reload. Now we have a whole bunch of information, and we can go back and look at that bar. We were looking at the 1340 bar, so that's 1:40 p.m. We'll scroll to find 1:40 p.m. Now, if the order is showing at 1:40, right, that means that the order was submitted after the 139 bar closed. This is triggering on bar close, and if it's being triggered after the bar closes, it gets submitted when the new bar opens. What that tells us is that the order was triggered from the 139 bar. So at 139, we want to know why these didn't trigger an order. At 139, we're missing one of our values here. Hang on one second. Let's go back to our format string. I did it incorrectly. Here we go. Need a 2 here, a 3 here, and a 4 here. Here we go. We've got 5 placeholders. Time, SMA1, SMA2, SMA1, SMA2. We'll clear that out and rerun it. Here we go. This is the information that we're looking for. Scrolling back to 139, the trigger bar for the order on the 140 bar. All right. So on the 138 bar, this is where it needed to be less than. That was at 2382.60. That needed to be less than 2382.80. That is true. And then on the current bar, it needed to be greater than. And on the current bar, the fast was at 2382.67. The slow was at 2382.78, and that was not true. So it hasn't crossed over. There's no order there. Let's look somewhere where there is an order and see if everything still makes sense here. 129, there's an order, so 128 should be where the trigger happened. Let's see if this makes sense. 128, let's see, the 127 fast was at 2382.92. That needed to be less than the slow, which was at 2382.90. That's true. The second part of this on the current bar, 128, 2382.96 for the fast now needs to be greater than the slow, 2382.83. This is also true. We have a winner. Both of these conditions are true. So because of that, that whole condition statement is true and an order is going to be triggered. So what we just did is we just did an analysis of the script where we printed out the information inside of the if statement and for ourselves can see with the actual values why there was no order placed at 139 and why there was an order placed at 128. So this is called debugging. It's probably the most useful thing that I could share with you. And I would say that as you start creating your scripts, add as many prints as you possibly can. We do have a question coming in. Can you step debug? And that's something that comes from Visual Studio. There's not something like that where you can put in breakpoints inside of NinjaTrader, but you can use Visual Studio for debugging. Now, that's not something I'm going to go into in this webinar, but I just want to let you know that on the NinjaScript Editor, there is a Visual Studio button to open up Visual Studio. And if you right-click, you can enable debug mode, and that'll allow you to use the breakpoints inside of Visual Studio. It's a little off subject though, I'm not going to go into any detail, but it is something that is possible with Visual Studio, just not possible through the NinjaScript Editor. The last thing I just wanted to say, we used onBar update, and I've talked about onState change, but I haven't talked about any of the other methods that are available in NinjaTrader. If we hit F1 on our keyboard, I'm going to bring this into view real quick. If we hit F1 on the keyboard, it'll bring open the NinjaScript Editor inside of the help guide. Inside of the help guide, if we go into the language reference section and then strategy, there's a lot of other methods that are available. Specific to strategies, you've got on execution update. This is anytime there's an order fill. On order trace. This is when you're you're customizing the output of trace orders. Trace orders allows you to see when an order has been ignored or has been submitted. It's literally a trace of the order. On order update, anytime the order changes state, so it's going to go from submitted to accepted to working to filled. All of those different states are going to trigger on order update, so you can track as it changes states and see when it's been filled or it's been accepted or initialized or any of those other states. On position update, this is going to be anytime the position changes. So your order fills and you go to flat, it's going to trigger, let you know that you're now flat. You can trigger something to happen anytime you're flat, or anytime you're long, or anytime you're short. Scrolling back up here, so there's a lot of other methods here. Those are the on order, on something methods. Up here in the common section, there's more. So you got on bar update, on connection status update, fundamental data comes, that's stuff like the daily volume, things like that is fundamental data. It comes in not often, basically when you first connect. On market data, this is anytime there's a change with the ask or the bid. On market depth, that's anytime there's a change in level 2 data. So the reason that I'm bringing that up is because you can have things trigger in different methods. Maybe you want something to collect all of those ask and bid updates. You can do so by triggering those in on-market data. You can also trigger orders in on-market data. So maybe in on-bar update, you have a condition that places your entry order, so your entry only gets placed when the bar closes. But then in on-market data, you have some logic that moves your exit order up and down so you can have some trailing action going on and have that happen in real time. So just wanted to throw that out there. There's some other methods. Definitely check out the help guide. If you have any further questions, I'm wrapping up right now, so go ahead and throw those into the room and I'll answer those before I go. I do want to say thanks for joining us. Next week, we're going to be doing the Strategy Builder webinar. This is where we just look more into the controls that are available to the Strategy Builder. You know, we go through talking about all of the default settings and things like that. So if you want some more information about using the Strategy Builder, join us next week at the same time.